Hi all and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams and we have a bit of a show for you tonight again. The intel is fairly extensive, a lot of it good and some mixed, but the usual clowns. But we did say we're not sitting there waiting for them. We will fight back, and we have fought back. And we'll find out that in the intel portion. We've got the usual news and views from around the world, and also a number of op-ed pieces, some of which cover some recent shows I've been on. And I was glad and thankful that the OYM lads and Declev and Michael and Matt and I can't remember the other guy's name. I think I've covered them all. If not, apologies. I was on a round table discussion on Saturday. I was on standby for OYM, but thankfully their guests turned up just in time on Sunday. And then on Monday I went on a news show called Liffey Sound out of Ireland, and that was a kind of rapid fire hour. Both of those shows are posted on the Think Different site, so you can go and listen to the archives of that. So I'll come back from a short break, most of which was working, and I ended up doing 4 shows in 8 days. No rest for me, it seems. Right, let's get on with the details of the show. And the link for the show, if you want to listen to it live or the archives, is www.spreaker.com/user/8955881. And we have the articles website, which also includes archives of the bigger shows that we've done. So if you're new to THI and you want to catch up with the essence of what THI is all about, go to the archive section and the must listen to shows, and you'll get the gist of what THI and the knowledge stream, and some of the names that people struggle with, like Anne, which is short for Android, which is Hillary, and Nutty Arsehole and all the rest. So we do like to have some humour mixed into the show. So that's the articles website, and there's also the documents, grounding, shielding and centering, and the breathing work, which is important at these times, because there is a lot of fun and games going on, and a lot of the alternative media people are being targeted and attacked, and it's important you shield up. We have the Facebook site Truth, Honour and Integrity, and the Facebook social media alternative site that doesn't have privacy issues, data issues, spying issues and all the rest, and no adverts either, is MeWe.com. And that's Truth, Honour and Integrity as well. If you're having difficulty finding, send an email to truth.honour.and.integrity@gmail.com. Honour is spelt the American way without the U. And you can send comments and questions for the show via that email also. We have the People's Club website link, and all about the foundation, and if you want to donate to the foundation, it's thepeoplesclub.org. Right, let's get into some news. It's just way down. The show's packed tonight. I've got your thinking caps on, and we're going to launch into quite a bit. Right, news. Rudy Giuliani is apparently now all in on President Trump. Of course, we did the piece on Mr. Giuliani and his involvement in 9/11, but maybe he's rectifying certain things. Time will tell. I'll have a piece on that later. And the former mayor has officially resigned from Greenberg Traurig, the powerhouse New York law firm he had joined just last year. and he's now going to dedicate himself to Trump's legal defense. Trump hired the 73-year-old politician last month to bring a quick end to the special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia probe. It seems to be everything but Russia at the moment, and again we'll have some more on that later. However, as things pan out, it's appearing that it may take longer than Mr. Giuliani or Mr. Trump realised. After recognising that this work is all-consuming and is lasting longer than anticipated, Rudy has determined it's best for him to resign from the law firm. Now, Mr. Giuliani had took temporary leave of absence from the law firm when he joined Trump's legal team last month, following the departure of the lawyer John Dowd. Now he's fully dedicating himself to the Trump defense team in light of the pressing demands of the Mueller investigation, and he went on to say he believes it is in everyone's best interest that I make a permanent resignation. This way my sole concentration can be on this critically important matter for our country. Yes, indeed. Issues to do the TSA. Everyone loves the TSA, not. And they've been in the news this week and are expressing regret after airport security demanded that Justin Trudeau's industry minister remove his turban, which sparked a Canadian government complaint. And Navdeep Bains, who is Sikh and serves as Canadian's Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development, was on his way to Detroit in April when security officers asked him to remove the turban, of which he declined on religious grounds. Once they realised my position, who I was ultimately allowed to fly, Mr. Bains said in remarks to a television station after Montreal's La Presse newspaper reported the incident. He said the issue speaks to discrimination and was the first time that had happened to him, adding the US officials did apologise later, and Foreign Minister Chrystia Freeland, who in my opinion is related to Alana Freeland out of the alt media, or an introduction into the alt media, she of Waldorf school fame, or infamous, shall we say, said separately from Washington that her department had spoke with US officials about the situation and expressed Canada's perspective. Well, I'm not being funny. What you either have a rule for one, which is then a rule for all. You can't have, in my opinion, what makes Mr. Bains any different to any other Sikh or Muslim who wears the turban. If they've got to take it off, why shouldn't he? That's just my opinion. They all leave them on or they all take them off. You can't have, just because they're government officials and so-called authority, getting away with the rules laid out by the TSA and the Safety and Security Board. What makes a government official any different from anybody else? Can they not be terrorists? I can certainly reel off a number of politicians who have been involved in terrorism. McCain, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Bush, and you could go on all night. The rule has to apply to all or none, in my opinion. Another example in the UK of, we mentioned last week about adding roughly £99, which is roughly $135 to your gas bill temporarily until they receive the payment. Now the NHS, National Health Service, the patients are being wrongly accused of fraudulently claiming free prescriptions and are being threatened with fines by the NHS. Or is it the NHS? Now, the data that was released under the Freedom of Information Act shows that over 1 million penalty notices were issued to patients in England in 2017 alone, which was double the level the previous year. Now, the problem is, it's a lot of elderly who don't understand the system, and they see a fine, they just pay it. One wonders how many of these fines were actually challenged. Nice little earner for nothing. Now, the fines, which carried a maximum penalty of £100 and are issued to those who wrongly claim free medication, are issued after an NHS exemption certificate has expired. But the data confirms that 343,000 penalty notices were subsequently withdrawn because the patient was entitled to the free prescription. Unbelievable. So 700,000 were threatened for no apparent reason, or so it would seem. These Freedom of Information requests appear to show a penalty system that is completely dysfunctional, said Lucy Watson, chair of the Patients Association. Any organisation issuing penalty notices and then having to withdraw nearly 1 in 3 because they were issued in error is not clearly operating as it should. This compounds the unjust and haphazard nature of prescription charging in England, with some patients facing substantial costs to manage their conditions and others being entitled to free prescriptions. Generally the immigrants, and it's not the immigrants' fault, it's the policy makers, all designed to divide and conquer. Give them all kinds for free, so the general populace turns on them because they're having to pay for it, without realising it's a deliberate policy that damages both parties. And they claim that part of the problem stems from patients moving home and failing to update their records. Really, with the tracking that goes on now, that clearly doesn't wash that type of excuse. Now, the NHS Business Services Authority, which is the agency in charge of issuing the fines, no doubt are a private corporation and nothing to do with the NHS, said it was continually reviewing its data matching process and making improvements to ensure eligible patients were not wrongly pursued. It said it was also trying to educate patients on the importance of keeping the details on their GP records, doctor records, and their exemption or prescription prepayment certificates up to date. Yeah, just blame the others. You've been found out, just own up. And perhaps a lawsuit against that private firm. Like I said, I don't think they're anything to do with the NHS at all. Another one of these private contractors who just loots the system. And when they looted the system, they then loot the people as well. Unbelievable. An MP from Japan's governing party this week has been accused of sexism after he said young Japanese women should have more children or face being a burden on the state. He spoke at an LDP party meeting. Kanji Kato said young women should have at least 3 children. Really, you got a country just across the water telling parents you can only have 1 child, which is now extended to India, and now Japan's telling people that they should have 3, otherwise you're failing the state. No, you're failing their pension scheme that they've already looted. That's the problem. Last year, the percentage of children in Japan fell to its lowest level since records began more than 100 years ago. Perhaps if you didn't make it financially impossible for people to afford kids, then they may have some more, or maybe not. Financial and other incentives to encourage bigger families have had little impact. Mr. Cato said that when he gives wedding speeches, he tells the bride and bridegroom to produce at least 3 children. We need 3 or more children from those people to make up for couples who cannot bear a child, no matter what they do, he said. And his comments were reported by Asahi Shimbun, and the current fertility rate in Japan is 1.42 births per woman. They need 2.2 to keep the pension system going. And that's why there's nothing left in the pensions, and they've looted it all. Of course, they'll blame females. On the one hand, they're given all kinds of... it's another example of chewing from both ends, where they reduced the westernized population via all kinds of drugs and putting stuff in food, etc., and the water. And promoting the gay agenda, which obviously doesn't produce children, and then realise, oops, we've got no money left because there's no children. You can't have it both ways. Well, these clowns seem to think they can, but then when it goes wrong, like it has now, they find they can't pay back what they've stolen previously. So now they offer seducements to bump up the births. That's basically how it works. Or not, as the case may be, because it didn't, even with the seducements in Japan, nothing changed. An oncologist in Michigan, I've mentioned this particular guy before, but he's come up again this week. The name of Dr. Farid Fateh operated numerous upscale clinics in Detroit area suburbs, and in 2013 he was accused of and arrested for giving cancer treatment drugs to patients who did not have cancer. And it was a tidy number. If memory serves me correctly, it was well over 2,000 patients were told that they had cancer and didn't. Mr. Fateh did not care for patients, no, just his back pocket, as it seemed, and he exploited them as commodities, the US Attorney Barbara McCade said in a recent news release. He overtreated, undertreated, and outright lied to patients about whether they had cancer so that he could maximize his own profits. Noting that chemotherapy is toxic to both cancerous and healthy tissue, McQuaid said Fateh gave poison to these people not to keep them alive, but to make money. He's not alone. Back in September of 2015, Mr. Fateh pleaded guilty to 13 healthcare and financial fraud charges and was ordered to forfeit $17.6 million by the US District Court Judge Paul Bowman, and he admitted to prescribing and administering unnecessary aggressive cancer treatments such as chemotherapy and infusion therapies to 553 patients so he could increase the billings, which all came to about $34 million to Medicare and private insurance companies. I hope that person goes away for the rest of his days, in my opinion, telling people who got cancer when they haven't. Knowing the fear that creates, it used to be a thing in the UK. No one would actually say the word cancer. They'd always mime it or whisper it or say the C word. Or that's the type of fear it creates. And you got clowns like this telling people they've got it just to make money. It's sick, This could get interesting. Republican Mark Meadows, chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, plans to request a full financial audit of the special counsel investigating Russia's alleged influence in the campaign over the 2016 presidential election. Mr. Meadows said in an interview set to air this Sunday that he will ask for a review by the Government Accountability Office, which is a non-partisan government watchdog that handles investigations for Congress. I wonder which one actually investigates Congress, not for Congress. Because that would be a good one to do, review. Mr. Meadows wants a full audit of expenses incurred by Robert Mueller and his team. And he told C-SPAN, as first reported by the Washington Examiner, he said he wants the audit to ensure that Mueller, a former FBI director and a US attorney, is making proper use of the money provided to his team by Congress to look into Russia's election meddling. May have started off that way, but it seems to have gone into all kinds of other avenues now. Mr. Mueller is required to produce a public expense report every 6 months, and had spent nearly $7 million as of December. I imagine that's near double now. And his budget comes from a permanent Treasury Department account specifically dedicated to the work of independent counsels. We're paying for all that again. All that money for he said, she said. I'm not too sure the general public will be afforded that sort of discourse. You know, you're assumed guilty and have to prove you're innocent. These people seem to go about it the opposite way. They're far more licensed than they should be afforded, in my opinion. The Scotland Yard have got into a bit of trouble in the UK. It's almost like the equivalent of the FBI in America. And the police, the general police, were called into the Home Office after suspected Class A drugs were found in the department's headquarters. Scotland Yard did confirm a small quantity was found by security staff at the Marsham Street building in central London on May the 3rd. The officers seized the drugs but added no further action was necessary. Go figure. Must have gone too high. So that suggests it wasn't a small quantity by any means. And advice has been given to security. In other words, don't report that again. No, I have no doubt. And the Home Office said it takes incidents of this nature extremely seriously and appropriate action had been taken. But to ignore it? Really? Would that be the same if you went into a black person's house and found the same amount? I think not. So that's not the appropriate action at all. Reports in the paper suggested the substance found was crystal meth, possession of which can result in a maximum sentence of 7 years in prison, unless you're one of the Scotland Yard or a police officer, it seems. The Home Office spokesman said a small quantity of drugs was found within the estate, and the incident was referred to the police by building security, who attended the site and removed the substance. The Metropolitan Police spokesman said the drugs were found in a communal area and police attended, and that was the end of it. No suspects have been identified at this time. Well, they could have told you that by the earlier statement of no action taken. So that must have been one of the big boys, so it seems. I'll have more on this in op-ed pieces, but this is the news part. Hundreds of people hit the streets of the latest version of Jerusalem late Saturday to protest against the relocation of the US Embassy to the city and a Jerusalem Day parade. saying that both only serve to escalate tensions with Palestine. The demonstration, organised by Coexistence Group Standing Together and settlement watchdog Peace Now, saw at least 100 protesters march from King George Street to the Old City Jaffa Gate. There was video footage posted showed protesters carrying placards with slogans including "Don't set Jerusalem on fire," and they were shouting all kinds of slogans. We oppose an escalation of the security situation and calling for Mr. Netanyahu to resign. From what I gather, is his own so-called people. I don't think they want to be aligned with Mr. Netanyahu in any way, but the Israeli people don't want him in place anymore either. But they have dodgy elections, or C-elections. They were citing that peace is worth far more than the embassy move, and that decision led to widespread protests across the Middle East and condemnation from UN member states, also the EU, and also Pope Francis, who may not be lasting too much longer. But the move was hailed by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as a historic landmark. Violence then erupted between Israelis and Palestinians at the holy site of the Temple Mount, which is actually not the Temple Mount, but there you go. Dome of the Rock, as it currently stands anyway, in East Jerusalem on Sunday, as hundreds of Jewish worshippers descended on the area for what is known as Jerusalem Day. Police broke up fights between the group of Arab and Jewish men, and clashes reportedly began around 1,000 Israelis moved towards the Temple Mount with Star of David flags chanting Jewish songs. The Jewish visitors were removed from the site for praying and bowing in contravention of regulations that ban all non-Muslims from praying in the grounds of El Aqsa Mosque. At least one person was arrested on suspicion of bowing. Oh dear. And what followed from that was Israeli forces killed 58 Palestinians, allegedly anyway, as it stands. There's rumours it's higher, there's rumours it's lower. But that appears to be the official figure. On the boundary fence with Gaza on Monday, local health officials said a level of bloodshed not seen since the most violent days of Israel's 2014 war in the territory. The death toll more than doubled the number of Palestinians killed during the 6 weeks of demonstrations dubbed the March of Return, and came on the same day as the new US embassy opened in Jerusalem. Now, tens of thousands of Palestinians had gathered on the edges of the fenced-off blockaded territory from mid-morning onwards, and many came to peacefully demonstrate, bringing their children, carrying flags. And there was appears to be a party spirit about it. Food stalls and snacks and music blared, but obviously it turned rather ugly. More than 2,700 people were injured, including 1,359 from live ammunition. I'll comment on that in a minute. The dead included 6 children under the age of 18, among them a 15-year-old girl and a medic, the ministry said, and the United Nations said that those responsible for outrageous human rights violations must be held to account. And the Human Rights Watch described the killings as a bloodbath. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas condemned a continuing massacre of the Palestinian people, and both Turkey and South Africa announced they were recalling their ambassadors from Israel. The Trump administration, however, blamed Hamas for the loss of life, and the responsibility for these tragic deaths rests squarely with Hamas. according to Deputy White House Press Secretary Raj Shah, who then went on to say Israel has a right to defend itself. And people have a right to demonstrate and protest also, without being shot at. You know, it's who knows who fired first or who threw stones. You know, that's pretty much all the Palestinians have got, a few rocks and a few slings. And yes, there's rockets at certain times, but don't think that's anything to do with the Palestinian people. I'll tell you exactly who that is in the op-ed piece in the second hour. In fact, it may even be in the third hour, given the intel. But surely they don't have to use live ammunition for people throwing stones. It's completely off the charts and totally unnecessary. You're not heard of rubber bullets. Yes, they can cause a nasty injury, but they're not killing people for throwing stones. Should the people be throwing stones? Maybe not. Kids throw, I used to throw stones when I was a kid. I think most lads did it at that time. Causing some of the neighbours to get a bit irate and throwing stones against the back wall or the back door. But it doesn't mean to say I should be shot for it. It's just way over the top and indicative, I'm afraid to say, of the reaction of Israel and those who run it. Don't blame the people. They're used as pawns, always have been. Yes, they've been blamed for a lot, but it's the political ideology that's the problem, not the Jewish people per se. I'll have more than that in a couple of op-ed pieces. We were talking about this before, about the issues of one child per family, and India's now took on the same mantle as what happened in China of one child per family. And because of the family traditions in those particular countries, if it wasn't a boy to carry on the family line, most girls were then destroyed, which is a ridiculous thing. Now, surely they could have carried on, made changes to the rules to keep the name. But no. So, in India, almost 250,000 girls younger than 5 die each year due to neglect resulting from society's preferences for sons. A gender discrimination study found out that figure this week. 250,000 girls under 5 every year die because of neglect resulting from society's preference for sons. Now, this was over and above those aborted and simply for being female. Researchers wrote in the Lancet Medical Journal, gender-based discrimination towards girls doesn't simply prevent them from being born. It may also precipitate the death of those who were born. About 19 deaths out of every 1,000 girls born between 2000 and 2005 was ascribed to the effects of gender bias. This amounted to about 239,000 deaths per year, or 2.4 million girls over a decade. So around 22% of the overall mortality rate of females under 5 is due to gender bias. Unreal. Here's also something that kind of divides some people. I've made my position quite clear on drugs, recreational drugs, but it can be used obviously for medical purposes, but there's been a bit of a downside, particularly to the growers, because of legalization in certain states, which again is completely wrong. You either legalize it in every state or not at all. And the glut of legal marijuana is driving Oregon pot prices to rock bottom levels, which is prompting some nervous growers to start pivoting to another type of cannabis to make ends meet, one that doesn't come with a high. And applications for state licenses to grow hemp will please many, and marijuana's non-intoxicating cousin have increased more than 20-fold since 2015, making Oregon number 2 behind Colorado among the 19 states with active hemp cultivation. Now, this is quite a rapidly evolving market, comes amid skyrocketing demand for hemp-derived extract called cannabinoid oil, or CBD, which is obviously covered fairly extensively around the alt media circles about being a health aid, and I'm all for that. And in its purified distilled form, CBD oil commands thousands of dollars per kilogram, which is a bit different from the cost of pot. So farmers can make more than $100,000 an acre growing hemp plants to produce it. That distillate can also be converted into a crystallized form or powder. And the word on the street everybody thinks hemp is going to be the new gold rush. Good stuff. Can be used for a lot of things: clothes, build houses, rope, you name it. There's a number of uses. My personal opinion is it would have been largely beneficial over the last 70 years. It's not to say it can't be beneficial now, but it is kind of old technology in a way. And it's just a shame that the authorities, as they're called, or so they like to be called anyway, decided that we weren't entitled to that type of plant. Australian authorities, you see, they do exist. For those of you who remember the piece from the last show, have now launched an investigation into Google's massive data harvest from smartphones, which reportedly allows the search giant to track users' movements even with location services turned off. You may want to watch that rather closely. I think that's going to get ugly. And the investigations into that data stemmed from findings made by the California-based software company called Oracle, who are in quite a bit of a trade war battle with Google. They think Google stole their interface, if memory serves me correctly, something to do with the Java platform. And they revealed that Google was collecting up to 1 gigabyte of users' monthly phone data to secretly trace their location, with the number of Android users in Australia at around 10 million. If Google were to pay to collect their data, the price tag at current data costs would be somewhere in the region of 432 and 540 million annually. Collect all kinds, don't pay. Now, according to experts from Oracle, Google collected this data to help advertisers, which they then sold on to. Concerned about the impact that both Google and Facebook have had on the advertising market, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission has now launched an inquiry. Oracle says Google can access detailed information on users' location even when the tracking services are turned off, and moreover, the phone doesn't need to have any apps installed or even a SIM card inserted. Take notes. I don't think I'll read that again. The phone doesn't need to have any apps installed. It doesn't need the tracking services turned on, and it doesn't even need a SIM card inserted for them to track it. Unless the phone is off, Google is able to constantly track it, whether their phones are in active use or set to airplane mode. Google also mapped IP addresses and Wi-Fi connection spots where mobile phones connected or attempted to connect, the report says. Now, people will say, well, get this app and it's encrypted and all this and pay for this, and they can't track this and can't track that. Don't bother. With the extra cost and the so-called encrypted calls, encrypted messages or encrypted emails either. Why? Because encryption was developed in Langley. Den of iniquity up in Virginia. And you don't think that they never put back doors in their encryption codes there. Maybe someone on that panel last week might think that, but I think most of us have gone past that stage. There you go. Ireland's foreign minister has been accused of hypocrisy this week for failing to expel Israel's ambassador over the IDF killing 60 plus Palestinians on Monday. Now, this is in spite of sending a Russian diplomat home after the Skripal case without any evidence. Yes, they towed the line that the UK did. That's the poisoning case, for those who are unfamiliar. And the Foreign Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Simon Coveney expelled a Russian diplomat in March following Britain's claim that Russia was behind the poisoning of a double agent, Sergei Skripal, and his daughter Yulia in Salisbury, England. And the decision faced pushback from many in Ireland who claimed it was a hasty move made before any evidence was presented. Well, they don't present evidence, they just tell you. It's only we who present evidence. Still in Ireland, the Irish Red Cross, oh dear, have asked citizens to put empty space to better use. I know this will kind of flip out Alan and Steve. I know that maybe he might cover it on his next show. But the Red Cross are basically asking people to create spaces in their homes and house refugees from the Middle East who the government offered asylum to in the middle of a national housing crisis. The Irish people are in the middle of a national housing crisis, in case you didn't notice either. Oh dear. Now, the national campaign is asking Irish homeowners to pledge a room or a vacant property for a Syrian refugee today in an effort to house some of the more than 1,800 refugees who have arrived from predominantly Syria, but also Iraq and Libya. Despite the country's current housing crisis, which has been described as a serious national challenge and threat to the economy, the charity is asking people with vacant properties or bedrooms to consider offering it to a refugee family for a minimum year-long contract. RT spoke to people in Dublin who seemed open to the idea. However, most were unable to offer such accommodation in a city that is already succumbing to soaring rent prices and struggling to house a growing homeless population. How about forcing banks who have stolen homes off owners and those homes are sitting empty? How about sequestering those homes? Or, given there's an awful lot of royalty, recent and ancient in Ireland, with swathes of acres on like 50 and 60 bedroom mansions, how about they put them up in their properties? Maybe that's too simple. Asking a population that's struggling, particularly on housing, and just these people should be helped. There's no question that they should be helped, but there is a million and one ways instead of pushing it and making the general populace feel guilty. Because the only ones that feel guilty are the ones telling you to put these people up. Red Cross and all those other organisations are part of the problem that created why the Syrians are in Ireland and all the other countries to begin with. Perhaps the CEOs at the top of the Red Cross can put them up with their $500,000 a year salaries. And talking about people's salaries, we're going to end the news portion on for those who like Mr. Trump and those who like people who donate things, you'll like this next one. President Trump donated a quarter's worth of his salary to the Department of Veterans Affairs today, which was announced by the Press Secretary Sarah Sanders. And today the President is proud to donate his 2018 first quarter salary to the Department of the VA to support their caregiver programs. She handed a check for $100,000 to Acting Secretary of the VA, Robert Wilkie, who thanked the President, and Trump has gone on further and said he's committed to donating his $400,000 annual salary to worthy causes. How about a prison cell for Anne? That's a worthy cause, isn't it? We'll have news on Anne shortly. Previously, Mr. Trump had given donations to the Department of Transportation, the National Park Service, and the Department of Education, and also the Department of Health and Human Services. Whether you like Mr. Trump or not, that's an honourable gesture to do, and it should be applauded no matter who it is. Right. That's the news out the way. We have our Intel news coming up soon, and we're going to have two songs that kind of indicate it. Can you feel the force? You want it all, but you can't have it. We'll be back shortly. Hi all, and welcome back to the second hour. Right, we have some Intel. Quite a bit of it. Just been rearranging it for order. Let's start with the first portion of it. There's about 10 or 12 pieces overall of Intel. Well, the first one is a warning and a message to the clowns. And the trust wants you, and you know who you are, to know that the offices have cameras too. And even the NSA cannot erase that footage. Take note. Now this next piece could have easily gone into the news portion, and I'm going to read it out, and then I'm going to tell you the reason why. It plays into the intel portion of tonight's show. Is Congo, and according to the World Health, which is a misnomer organization, there's an Ebola outbreak that has spread to a city of more than 1 million people, and a worrying shift as the deadly virus risks travelling more easily in densely populated areas. Medical teams hurried to track down anyone thought to have had contact with infected people, as this vast impoverished nation, a veteran of 8 previous Ebola outbreaks, for the first time is fighting the virus in an urban area. 2 suspected cases of the fever were reported in Wangata health zone, including Mbandaka, the capital of northwestern Equateur province, and the city is about 150 kilometers or 93 miles from Bikoro, and the rural area where the outbreak was announced this week was notified by Congo's health minister Oli Ilunga. 1 sample proved positive for Ebola, he said. That brings the number to 3 of confirmed Ebola cases, so it's hardly an outbreak. And a total of 44 cases have now been reported, including 23 deaths, according to the World Health Organization. That in total includes 20 probable cases and 21 suspected ones. Now, this comes as no surprise to the host of this show. Congo are having financial issues, and the trust had been in contact with the Congo along with many other countries, and they're not happy of the continuing blocking of the funds and the transfer of funds, and so lo and behold up pops an Ebola outbreak. If it is correct, then this is deliberate to get the Congo officials to back down. And if it's not correct, then this allows the fear porn media to ramp it up. And this is kind of what's going on globally at the moment, where if it's not the World Health Organization, it's the Rothschilds threatening global genocide via germ warfare, which they have threatened a number of times. Including between now and September for some reason or other. Or they've been sending in mercenaries under the banner of the IMF to threaten banks and the clerks at the desk to shut the bank down. That type of behaviour, thankfully, in a number of countries has not been tolerated, and they have fought back. I'm not going to give the details of those countries in particular at the moment, because that puts them under more threat. But this is kind of what's going on behind the scenes in many issues. Now, there's been more media bullshit put out this week about issues between North Korea and South Korea and a possible summit cancellation between Kim Jong-un and President Trump. Ignore it. It's the Portal people fear porn rolling out again. Just totally ignore it. They didn't get what they wanted, and playing their usual fear, bit like the Congo, playing fear games and using the media to do so. People in the UK will know this particular guy, because he's reasonably well known over in America. But some research was ongoing today, and guess who's the chairman of the council and a quartet representative for JP Morgan International? None other than Mr. Tony Blair, or Bloody Liar, as I like to call him. And it seems like failing at running a country and failing to deliver peace in the Middle East, which is two of his former jobs, still gets you a high profile and no doubt high paid position in what is increasingly a corrupt banking establishment like JP Morgan. Message to the daughter of one of the JP Morgan associates on the board who blocked transfers this week. The new system logs who did it. Oops. Expect a visit. Now, it's come to our attention as we dig deeper into the rabbit hole of how most banks are totally corrupt and how they operate, and bank board members are all linked to the Council on Foreign Relations, the UN Council of Elders, and also the Trilateral Group. So they have these, what are basically inside all the banking organisations, like think tank groups that dictate policy and also fiscal and foreign matters. Furthermore, some people on the American bank side are also members of something called the United States Treasury Advisory Agency. Nothing to do with the real Treasury. Now, this is a private advisory committee who apparently have great influence on the affairs of the United States Treasury Department. In other words, bogus group telling them what to do. Now, it's what it has been found out, courtesy of the system, is some of these people are not even American citizens or nationals, and a few of them are linked with dual citizenship of the UK, Israel, and also the Saudis. We may hear more about that in coming shows. Expect something to look forward to. Expect the heat to be turned on the FBI and the Department of Justice in the near future. It is coming. Things are about to break free in relation to Clinton, Obama, Comey, Abedin, Weiner, and others. Watch for that. One of the challenges, I'll put that in that manner, on the round table was that I mentioned 70% of world trade, 70, is off-world trading, or it was. Not as much now, as a lot of those trade agreements, be it the Paris climate agreement, as it is known to the public anyway, and the Trans-Pacific and the Transatlantic, were largely to do with off-world trading, not on-world trading. So I have a list of some of the places that are the worst aspects of the off-world trade, and these are as follows: Tel Aviv, Indonesia, New Zealand, Hawaii, the Philippines, China, and Netherlands. Faction stuff. Chinese factions, Chinese elders, Asian faction, have hired Eric Prince, the former Blackwater Z Academy mercenary guy, to work on their behalf for what they have sold to him as getting their money back. So he's been used as a mercenary group to go and hunt people down to get their money back. Mr. Prince was initially part of the Trump team, but has done a runner. As I understand it, that's why I said last week, don't expect his sister, Mrs. DeVos, to last too much longer. Now, reports on how Mr. Prince is doing is he's having no luck, and he has now been given an ultimatum last weekend that he had until the 24th of May to complete the task he was paid to do. Good luck with that, Mr. Prince. And I'm hoping that when he fails to deliver, and he will, that he's not allowed back in this country, because he's operating against people inside this country who are only interested in this country and not Chinese elders and dragon families and all the rest. We've had enough of these mercenaries who just take money from the highest bidder and no empathy or compassion to their own country. So what I want to make clear on this subject, although the country of China has assets, this is in no way or ever was owned by any of the dragon families. So Mr. Prince is going to make himself a bit of a pariah, because they don't take too kindly over there, you not completing your task, as Mr. Keenan found out. And he's also shat on a number of American people, including the government. Next intel item is about Anne, also known as Hillary Clinton, and she has now finally realised, hello McFly, she will probably never get access to the systems nor to be able to steal from the banks anymore. So what did she do yesterday? Well, she decided to try and take hard assets and thought she would start with the BLM. Now, contrary to lots of people on the internet, the BLM is no longer the rogue entity that it was made out a few years ago. They did a deal with the trust so that the resources goes to America, not to Russia and not to other countries, at the behest of Rothschilds and Bushes and Obamas et al. And Clinton. But it would stay where it was dug up. And she claimed ownership, an awful lot of people claiming ownership of things they don't have, over the BLM, and tried to execute on contracts she had signed before the election. And of course, we put this out in the intel before the election took place, that Anne had signed off in-ground contracts on all or large portions of America's in-ground resources, both current and future. Because, and this was signed off in August, I think it was, just before, as far as I'm concerned, she died. Of course, when she didn't win the one-horse race selection, all those contracts were void, which is probably the main reason why Mr. Trump got in. Because the worst thing that this could have happened to this country was Anne getting in, and she just signed off on all our in-ground resources. It would literally bankrupt the whole country, worse than it is now. So she was going to sign over all the in-ground assets of America to the Chinese faction, aka Rothschilds and Chinese elders and dragon groups. Quite why she's still walking the streets, or whoever that version of Hillary is beyond me at at this point. Way beyond my understanding. So Anna's found out that she has no authority over the BLM, neither does the UN, because Trump pulled out of the Paris Treaty Agreement, Climate Agreement, Pact, Treaty. They changed the names that many times. Well, they couldn't call it a treaty because the UN isn't sovereign, so that's why it changed name. Only sovereigns can do treaties, and the UN are not sovereign and cannot do treaties. And so, because Trump pulled out, they have been blackmailing him big time. But contrary to their popular belief, he hasn't resigned yet. And we'll see on Mr. Trump. There's good elements and there's not so good elements, but nobody knows how much stress he's under. These people just threaten everything, torture, you name it. Now, Hillary may have gotten away with the uranium deal, but it will come back to bite. That went to the Red Dragon group, which is people name as Russian, but the Red Dragon is nothing to do with the Chinese dragons, as that particular guy is half Austrian and half Russian. Now, the Red Dragon had a large amount of debt that it owed to the trust, and so he was relieved, or they were relieved, of the uranium also. So all that uranium didn't go to Russia, it didn't go to the Red Dragon, it was reacquired back. And for clarity, the Russian government had no involvement nor benefit from this so-called sale of United States uranium. Just today, the Department of Interiors, one of the government groups, found out it is currently in the trust and is being held in trust on behalf of the Republic of the United States of America, as it says in the contract. That's for the Department of Interiors group. On we go with more intel. This is the big part. Now, the trust has been rather busy this week. It's always busy. But we've been setting up the new system in relation to the banks in particular. It's not only the banks, but this is the focus over the past week or so. The transfer, the blocking of the transfers, and the implications of doing such going forward. And they went about dealing with the issues created from the old system of mirrored accounts and black screens, backdoors and dodgy codes that were all in the old system. And so what was done this week is all those backdoors, screens and mirrored accounts were all deleted, with a difference this time, and new firewalls were created both inside the banks and also outside the banks to prevent further intrusions to banks and people's accounts. Stopped altogether. So they duplicated the back system's high-tech firewalls, which also apply to the data cable systems worldwide. Yes, I can hear you. I know you're trying to ping the show. SWIFT, wires, IBAN, EFT and ACH all now fall under the new firewall systems, both from the inside and also, as I said, on the outside. Totally blocked from intrusion. The new firewall systems registers the bank officer who is trying to do the input, and if fraudulent, then their user ID is blocked permanently and a report goes to the agency. In the US, if it's in America, it goes to the FBI for embezzlement. And if there are arrests to occur, it is on that particular agency to do so. So for the daughter of the JP Morgan associate, oops. Furthermore, this new firewall also prevents any external hacking and any fake mirror systems of the cabal. It's getting to be very transparent out there. So no more fake mirrors, no more of the fake SKRs that they've tried to install in the system. And the firewall system also has a mapping system, which we may cover in greater detail in a future show. And the mapping system appears to be a lot of fun for those who like to do research on rogue elements. Oops. So what happens now, so in order to freeze an account, which is they've been doing freely to many people that they don't particularly like or don't want to advance forward, or to wire transfer the bank officer or government official must have a valid case number to do so. So they can't just go in with rogue FBI, as has been the case recently with fake badges that were issued by bad elements in the Department of Homeland Security as favours, as I understand it. They must have a valid case number, so it has to be registered for them to then go into the bank and attempt to freeze the account. Now, this case number is cross-referenced with the agency and or police systems, and if the badge, agent or case number is found invalid, then the system will automatically, without the bank's input, reject it. In other words, they will not be allowed to freeze an account just because they don't like somebody. So there'll be no more blocking of individuals that are not in alignment with the elites or the elites. And in the past, this has run rampant globally, as in just the last month, they threatened Mr. Trump, stating they would take all of his assets. Well, Trump's a fairly wealthy man, and they threatened to take all his assets. Well, this type of blackmail is a constant with the factions against politicians in particular. You know, I know many of us don't like politicians, but they are under heavy threats. And have been, or of course it's increased now, because some of them have found out the truth and want to help. In fact, there's quite a few who want to help, but the threats against them by the factions is fairly heavy and severe, as I understand it. But the stealing of assets under blackmail and threat will now no longer be possible under the new system. So the gist of this is, if you block any transfers of funds, your login is registered and recorded by the system, and you will face the consequences of such actions. No longer can they hide behind the firewalls and the mirrored screens to play dirty on the financial system. Wells Fargo, which is still under review by the American government, JP Morgan, Bank of America, Citibank and others tried not to allow the new internal firewall system and tried to work in manual mode, and this took their systems offline altogether. You interfere and your whole system goes off. Love it. By going, but this particular act was deliberate to stop the new firewall being installed, and unfortunately for them, and happily for us, the firewall had already been installed and forced resets of their systems. And so they've got it whether they like it or not. And these were taking place today and tomorrow for those main 4 and the others. And it was announced an hour before the show that the JP Morgan system was completed and is now under the new firewall system and can't be interfered with. Oops. Last piece. For good cyber protection, the Manor Wealth Holding Trust has been awarded full protection under the Department of Homeland Security Safety Act. This is bigger than people may initially realise. One of the issues Kim and her team have been working on is the safety of the people receiving the funds for projects. The clowns have threatened all kinds of blackmail and what they're going to do, ranging from details to do with the IRS to arresting people for using what they call stolen funds. Oh, the irony. No, the funds belongs to the people, not you. You've been using stolen funds for thousands of years. So the usual fear porn rhetoric they use to put people off going ahead. Well, with this particular Safety Act, it extends to any of its project owners using the firewall protection of the trust. So the trust will then protect any of the project owners, which one would be myself, and Tank is probably another one, and any of the other bigger projects, whether it's the rail or some of the other things that are planning in the works. Those people will all become under the protection of the Homeland Security Safety Act. You can't meddle with them. So that's the intel for this week. Perhaps we'll have a song detailed and quite positive intel this week. And no doubt they'll try to fire back. They won't like that. What with that new system, because they don't have control of it, and it's capable of doing far more than most people realise. They're gonna not like it one iota, and they can't. They've already proven they can't hack it, and they can't interfere with it, and it exposes them every time they attempt to do so. A real, proper, transparent system for the financial world. I have to say that's going to upset quite a few million rogue people on Wall Street, etc., rogue governments and rogue dragon groups and whatnot. But he didn't want to play fair, so that's the way it's going to be. Right, let's get into some op-ed pieces. Now, I mentioned this earlier, and it's important for, I think, our listeners kind of grasp it now, but there's many new people listening to this show. But when people grasp the fact that ISIS is ISIL, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, the IRA, yes, the IRA, Taliban, Hamas, the Sunnis, the Shias, the Wahhabis, the PLO, SS, Blackwater, Z Academy, Muslim Brotherhood, the Triads, the Mafia, Boko Haram, and other African tribes, and all other notable so-called freedom fighters are all part of their system. All of them bought and paid for. Those groups work against we the people. They're not for the benefit of the people. They're all mercenaries, paid for largely by clowns in this country. There's enough Freedom of Information Act documents that prove that, and in particular Langley. Now, the realization of that all of those groups will lead to more people to get where we stand in the world today, and how to understand global incidents and how we have to combat it. So just because it says a Muslim group did this, that and the other, recognise who bought and paid that group, who set it up, like Obama and Huma Abedin, both Muslim Brotherhood. It's like a secret society with weapons. Mafia ran by the Vatican, for and by the Vatican, set up by them. Well, people automatically think these are rogue elements. Yes, they are rogue elements, but they're all deliberate rogue elements is what I'm getting at. Created. So we have it this week, people blaming Hamas, including in our own group. Some people just don't get anything, sadly. But perhaps with more research, you'll understand more blaming Hamas, really, for violence in Palestine. Do you really think, with all the Zionists and the American-funded groups, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, IS and ISIL, and all their resources and funds and think tanks, they wouldn't have eliminated Hamas from the Middle East by now? If Hamas were an objection to it, think about it. Since when have the cabal, have they allowed obstacles for their plans to continue for near 40 years like Hamas have? 1987 they were set up. Does that make sense? A few ragtag groups known as Hamas can carry on despite Israel and its might and American forces over there for near 40 years. Does it make sense? No. So the opening statements of all of that group I named are bought and paid for by Zionists to cause mayhem whenever something is convenient for them to do so. Like media distraction pieces like they rolled out this week. Well, like I said, I did 2 extra shows in the past week and nearly did a third. But thankfully for the OYM lads and their listeners, I think I've been on, they've heard enough of me. I've been on quite a lot. The guests who live in Hawaii and were on evacuation orders because of the volcano issue, managed to turn up just before I was about to go on air, and so that was good for them. And then on Monday I did a show, a completely new show to me, probably to many of the listeners as well, on Liffey Sound with Mick O'Connell, which was a rather interesting show, I thought. And you know, it's always difficult when you go on a new show, when you have as many subjects that I cover, of which ones to pick. Well, he kind of led in with certain things, and we ran with that for a bit. And obviously the early part was the ET narrative, which he picked up from the round table I did on the Saturday. And I do enjoy the ET side of things, as it is relevant to what's going on in everyday life, as much as some people wouldn't like to see or admit that. But personally, I hope not to be just defined or labelled as on the ET stuff, as I think we have so much more that we do and cover in our shows, and not just all about ETs. Now, when you're going on new shows, the thing is sometimes if you've got new listeners, they can switch off if all the talk is all about ETs, and I am aware of that. Too many just joining, or those who are new to the alternative media, do struggle with too much of the ET narrative. They want to hear about foreclosures and banking fraud, what they're comfortable with. Some come into it because of the ET narrative, but you can't cater to all. Well, I just hope that I'm not being defined by the ET story, because I shouldn't be. Like I said, we do cover a lot. Well, the second show, for those who have heard it, got some of our listeners kind of annoyed, and I do understand where they're coming from. Sometimes I will give people, like that particular guy on that show some rope to hang themselves with, but that guy pretty much brought his own. It was kind of interesting to take part in, and also to sit back and listen. I took part in a round table last year, and it was a rather cool experience, getting opinions from others in the community that you don't normally speak to. But of course, the main topic in the show last Saturday that caused some irritation was the discussion on when or what is disclosure, and if information is disclosure or not, which has kind of contradicted itself in many ways. Well, to some, disclosure is only validated if you write a book, attend a conference, or do videos, or heaven forbid, go on Ancient Aliens. Oh dear. Or perhaps if you're an ex-CIA guy, or an ex-FBI, or ex of some other agency, or a super soldier, or even worse, an ex-politician like Simon Parkes, that appears to validate the information to some people. Or ex-military, that validates it. Well, does it? It just depends. Now, to some people, in particular the guy in the round table, it appears no amount of proof is enough, and yet strangely contradicted himself twice by saying Bob Lazar gave evidence. Well, Bob Lazar told a story, no different to me telling a story, but he appeared to believe Bob Lazar and Billy Meier, of all people. For those who are unfamiliar with Billy Meier, well, I think most people are familiar. What I do know is Billy Meier did have one or two encounters, and all the rest was enhanced as part of a story. They, not necessarily his doing, it was others who were interested in making money, and then changing the narrative, and then subsequently discrediting. That's the way it goes. And then this particular guy on the show extolled the virtues of Leo Zagami. Oh dear. Another ex. There's no such thing as ex-CIA or ex-FBI or ex-Illuminati, in my opinion. They're still part of it in some way. But he then went on and made a statement that disclosure won't happen. Well, for him, it won't. It will never happen. As if he can't see by now that disclosure has already happened on the ET narrative, then he's stuck in a box of his own making. And this is part of the problem, not just for him, but for many people. They wrap themselves into boxes and create their own narrative that they're comfortable with, rather than breaking out of the boxes and stepping free. Because the more you learn, the more you expand. But to those people who create their own boxes, they will never see or believe anything. You know, you might as well be with the sleepers as do that. You know, as their boxes of weakness and fear overcomes them too much. Fear plays too big a role in society, and it dictates far too much. And people will choose to not hear information when it becomes available if you've lowered and tightened the box around you so much that you're unable to listen to, or at least take on board, the new information. You're not going to hear it. If you've got that box too tight around you, or that bubble, you're not going to, that news doesn't become available. That's what's happened with all the sleepers. They've just wrapped themselves in a nice little bubble where everything's hunky-dory and life goes on happily, except it's not. Well, you know, Bob Lazar and Billy Meyer were over 20 years ago. Perhaps in 20 years' time, that guy will look back on what I and many others have said, and maybe he'll believe then. I have no idea, or perhaps not. Maybe the disclosure issue isn't what's getting in his way, and perhaps, as maybe some of the numerous listeners' comments of his rather unbalanced ego is correct. Either way, you know, he may be a nice guy who just struggles with new information. He's not alone in that. But you can't make judgments in the manner he did on those types of shows. Who knows? But I hope he listens to what he said on that show again, as it may give him some pointers in the future. But like I said on the show, this show never tells you to follow anyone but yourself. He seems to think I was the Pied Piper. But I've said often, do your own research. Truth always comes from within. It always does. And what finished me off is when he said that the internet is all clean. Oh dear. Once people are saying that to me, given the knowledge that's been put out, it was a complete not a waste of my energy interacting with somebody who clearly gets nothing, or worse, given some of his connections in the past. Kind of makes me suspicious. But like I said in the show, yet again, it appears that myself and THI are the only ones that's being challenged in the community. And the real question is why? Why isn't other people who put out information questioned or challenged? Or the guy didn't actually challenge, he was in essence threatening in some aspects. Why doesn't that happen to other guests? I think by now most of our listeners will know the answer. Now, the more I end up on other shows, the more we find out where people are at in their particular learning curve. I know some of you were a bit taken back by some of the names that came up in the two shows. I'm thinking, that's about 3 or 5 years ago knowledge. Well, you know, perhaps it might make some realise we kind of get spoilt in some ways with the insights and fairly up-to-date knowledge that this show brings. But not everyone is at the same learning level, and we've had quite an upgrade in many ways with the information that comes out of our show, and we should always be aware of that when going on other shows. Now, the NXIVM story seems to really taken on has gone from being highlighted by THI in August and is now running the gauntlet of the mainstream media, and it's about to get real interesting. Court documents that came out yesterday were filed in New York against Keith Raniere and also Alison Mack, the actress, for sex trafficking, forced labour and other crimes. And part of the documents that uncovered it are going to dig deep in discoveries of investigations, and now digging into 90 companies affiliated with NXIVM. Now, what will this bring up? Well, it will lead to exposure of the Bronfman sisters, which was mentioned in the story back in August on THI. It involves the Clintons, it involves Obama, Goldie Hawn, the Epstein crew on the island, and also Necker Island and Richard Branson. He's involved in it as well. A group called Rainbow Cultural Gardens is another one to watch for, to name but a few. And things could and should get rather interesting on that particular story. It will bring out the big names. How are we doing? Okay. Well, there was a fairly big internet bust up in the past week involving what I would describe as over-promoted alternative media figures. It seems that Q thinks Alex Jones, Jerome Corsi and Hagman, and what was the other one? American Intelligence Network, I think, or AIM, I think it's called, and some other name with intelligence in. There's a few of them. Are all shills, and they all think Q, vice versa, is the same thing. And of course, people know, regularly listen to the show, know my opinion on Mr. Jones. Just look at it recently. He spent, 12, 18 months, 2 years maybe, promoting all things Trump. And now he decides he isn't buying them now. Just jumps in, and then changes the narrative. Of course, he will know, if he, as he's put out, he's very close to Trump, talks to Trump, etc., that Trump's being threatened. So some of his decisions are not going to be favourable because of the threats. You can't win a war in one go. Sometimes you have to lose a few battles to win the ultimate war. And this may or may not be the case. It will be made much clearer by the end of the year. That I can guarantee. But some people, in fact many people, still follow Alex Jones despite all the evidence against him. Each to their own, I suppose. But one thing that put me off many years ago, and that was enough for me. Yes, I did do more research and found out more things, but the fact that he went into Bohemian Grove, you don't get in those places without being invited. You don't break in. I'm sorry, you just don't. To some of the top mercenaries who have failed to break in certain high-level meetings and places like that. But Mr. Jones just sails on a boat and goes in and takes footage and still survive to this day. People need to ask is, do you really think these corporate entities would give so much to Alex Jones if they thought he would lead the public into eliminating them and the New World Order? Does it make sense? Why doesn't he give 3 million, some of that 3 million to the homeless people or the veterans? One thing that's kind of gone unnoticed in the last 12 months in the alt media, as it's kind of been taken over by YouTubers and various ex-agency people, and also various groups with intelligence in their name, along with the QAnons, of which I'm unsure of how many of them exist or how many of them are real. I think there's elements, one of them is, and there's an awful lot of duplicates that are muddying waters at the moment. But there's one group who direct intelligence agents or ex-agents or military top brass called Veterans Today. It came up this week. I thought, I haven't heard from them for a long time. I used to enjoy one particular guy. I'll remember his name in a minute. He used to write it on the ET stuff. It was rather interesting, and most of it, chunks of it, were rather correct. But suddenly they've just disappeared into the background, and people like George Webb, who came in a blaze of publicity, but was then exposed by this show and others for working with and being linked to Mossad, which he subsequently admitted. But this is kind of a common theme in the alternative media, where they come and then face did that piece on them, and it's been almost silence from the two of them since. You will see a pattern. Now, another point that came up during the round table show is how much would it take to be bought out, which is kind of an interesting topic in many ways, and I'm glad it came up in the show. As to me, far too many people in humanity have sold out, and not only in this time period, but many previously also, thousands of years, sold out far too easily. Now, the way I see it is the two biggest issues humanity faces is fear and seducement. Far too easily, far too many buckle under the pressure of those two, what is essentially control systems. Me personally, I've made my stance quite clear. I will not be swayed by anything outside of restoring this planet to operate in a better way for the benefit of all people and beings, not just one. It's the top and bottom line for me. But the question was asked in the show, have we been offered sums to walk away? Yes, we have. Did we take it? Nope. Kim has been offered vast sums of money to walk away and hand over the keys and the codes and everything from the trust back to them. She told them where to stick it. Not only that, it doubled her and the team's resolve to go forward and end their reign of terror. So it backfired spectacularly. But the problem throughout history is too many have gone weak and sold out on the promise of wealth, fame, land, resources and titles. King Julius the latest, it seems, until proven otherwise, and evidence requested is still not forthcoming from that camp. But it happens on all levels of society, not just the upper echelons, as they think. Cops, judges, social workers, politicians, bank clerks, I could go on and on. Given a little extra pay or a pay rise, and they turn their backs on what is going on. But we can't all keep doing that. We've paid a heavy price for turning our backs. In essence, we've also paid a heavy price for standing up and facing it. Sin eating, rejection from so-called society. But I know where I'd sooner stand. Despite all they've thrown at me and many others in the community. My family back in the UK all want me to quit and get on with and have some sort of life. And I do get that. My response is not everyone can keep living the lie and turning their eyes and ears away. And also their backs away from what is a cesspool of filth that is perpetrating our world. Some of us have to take up the fight, and that is my choice. But the people in general got rid of fear and the lure of seducement with the help of many more like-minded people, we could end this nonsense an awful lot sooner. Fear and seducement. Get rid of both of them. Perhaps this song's fitting. I won't back down, and I won't. It's been far too easy for some people. We've been kind of disappointed in some aspects of people selling out because it's the short-term gain, easy solution. But all it does is create the long-term problem and continues the long-term system of control. At the end of the day, some, or preferably many, have to stand up and go, I'm not happy with this, and I'm going to fight as much as I can. And if it takes the rest of my days here, then that's what it takes. I think we're seeing rather extraordinary progress in many ways. And yes, we haven't had what some people would describe as big events, whether it's Obama or Clinton's or Bush's getting arrested. They're nowhere near as dangerous as they used to be when they were hidden. Now, what people are saying, oh, the world's getting worse. No, the world's not getting worse. The world's getting better, because all that's happened is you're finding out things that were hidden. So it's only perceived as being worse. There's often the saying, oh, it was better in the old days. No, it wasn't. You knew nothing. You lived in a bubble world. That's why it was better. So all this stuff has been going on a long, long time. Now you've stepped out of your bubble and into reality. And so, yes, it appears that the world is the whole world is one giant nasty place. But only because so much has been done by the people in the alternative media to expose these criminals and psychopaths. So don't believe for 1 second that the world's getting worse, because it's not. You just know more about it than you used to. Now, last couple of op-ed pieces, which is kind of topical, is the difficulty of following today's news, or the current news, and appointments in regard to the current administration in America. A number of appointments many people have not been too happy with, certain names, and suggest it doesn't augur too well due to various links and connections in the past of certain appointees. The reality is, currently, we do not have too many viable options from the general public to go into these roles. I've been saying it for a long time. We need to step up into their roles ultimately and remove them altogether. Well, a government is a rather large entity that has to keep operating, and unfortunately they're the ones that are familiar with it, rogue or not. And we have to take that into account going forward, is we don't have viable options, or too many. And yes, it's the rogues running the rogues in some aspects, but they're still exposing each other. And that's what, to me, is what we must hold on to. But we have to get more people out, in my opinion, out of the alternative media into these roles to then go forward with a better way for the future. Well, some could step up now, but the reality is they would be highly inexperienced operating in a field as things stand now. It's utter chaos between the politicians, between all the various departments, be it agencies or not. They're all arguing with each other. How are you going to prosper in that field? So I think this is kind of what Trump is doing. I could be wrong. It's still in a balance in many ways. Am I happy with Giuliani being appointed? Not really. Bolton? Not really. But if they know the ins and outs, and they've already been shown their fulcrum files, maybe those people are buying some time. Just maybe. Of course, if he stepped into the role, you're basically going into the viper's den. Because you want to do things for them by the people. These clowns are not insistent for them by the people. They follow the higher orders. And so going into that role as it stands currently would be, threats would be constant and also severe. These people have no compunction of threatening your children and all kinds. They did that the Bushes did that to Obama the first day of his inauguration. They threatened to kill the children unless he followed the line. So whether Obama was good, bad or indifferent, under that sort of stress and threats, it's very easy to just follow the line, isn't it? We can escape that type of field in many ways, but life in the White House and Congress is like life in a goldfish bowl. It's not as easy to escape that sort of reality in the confines of constant threats, bribery, and all kinds of other stuff that you have to get involved in to stay in your position. It's not good. But the reality is, we've got these names is because too few have stepped up in what I feel is a very crucial time for us all. The old saying, you want change, well, be the change can and does apply here, but when you offset it against the backdrop of 70 years of systematic control systems, dumbing down education, a policy of paying for all the best people in the respective fields instead of training your own people, and a policy of making many Americans sick and dependent on drugs, that aspect in particular has to change, where thought process of minor scrape or cold leads to Americans raiding the pharmacies for cure-alls. Not everything requires drugs or tablets or medicine. It's become a mindset. It hasn't worked in the past, and so how do we expect it to work now? Well, you change the mindset, where drugs are the last resort for making you well, and not the first. So it's hardly surprising we haven't got a wealth of talent to step up into those roles, given what's gone on, what's being perpetrated against the American people over the last 70 years. It's almost become what it is, a closed shop. So what we are left with basically now is a bunch of criminals potentially fixing a criminal system. Can it work? Yes. Should we fully trust them? No. No way should we ever trust any politician 100% to do the right thing. Why? Because they are more controlled than we are. I know many people find that hard to believe, but that is the reality. Politicians are lower level puppets. They don't even register on the who's who list. None of them. But what they're doing now is more of the politicians are finding out more of the real truth now in the past 12 months than they have done the whole of their lifetimes. They now know. But then, if you think like one of them, this drain in the swamp might expose what they have done, and then fear kicks in. If you were a politician and you've done certain things, would it not concern you? You have to think like they do. It's kind of an awkward conundrum, is it not? And depending on the approach of those who have highlighted their demeanours via the Fulcrum Files, and the depth of it would likely determine how they operate going forward also. You know, they're involved in taking a bit of backhanders from lobbyists here and there. It's not right. But there's others that have been involved in the most heinous crimes, as we all know. It's a different ball game, and will be treated as such. But people like Hitler, Obama, Bushes and Cheney are hardly going to just give up and hand themselves over, are they? Their crimes are way too deep on public acceptance level to just hand themselves over. So they'll fight right to the end. But what if they all know they will be exposed, and so they are allowed to rectify their stances for a period of time, whilst investigations and collection of data on the whole system is underway. That's a question, not a statement. Cheney, of course, is of particular interest, as he is way beyond the snarling face behind the Bush regime. Darth Vader himself, on a soul level, hasn't been too nice for a very long time. Not just the current. Unlike the other old soul, Mr. Kissinger, those two in particular are heavy orchestrators of the dark arts, and most of the rest are basically puppets to be thrown under the bus. But those two are particularly nasty. Mr. Cheney, as we said last week, is still in hiding in his 8-story underground bunker. No doubt all paid for by the American people. Whilst he sends mercs out to do his dirty work, which I experienced recently. But at which point, when a number of mercs have been taken out and exposed, do the same mercs turn on who keeps getting their buddies killed? How many does it take before something triggers in your own brain? Are you next? Because you think Cheney or Kissinger or any of the other goons thinks anything about you, you're wrong. And these mercs must wonder when their day is due also. Now the message to them folks is, I know your sole goal is you will do any job which pays the most. That's your forte. That's why you're a mercenary. But you must all now begin to realise these paymasters have little or no interest in your well-being. Zero. Otherwise they wouldn't be sending you into stupid missions, many of which have left your buddies dead. And my question to them is, isn't it time you all make the paymasters do their own dirty work? So if Cheney wants somebody taken out, get him to do it himself. I'm sure there's a number of people would like to go in combat with Mr. Cheney. And the same applies in the military. If the top brass want war, send them into battle. And leave our men, women and children out of it altogether. I guarantee war would end overnight if generals and the Bushes and Kerrys, both of which have dubious military records to begin with, and John I-staged fake prisoner of war McCain, send all them and their families into battle. Now wouldn't that make good TV? Watching cowards and clowns slug it out. The best TV show of all time. It would end war overnight. Final op-ed piece, as I said I would cover, but some people have been questioning it, and rightly so, is Trump and Israel. And it's a kind of a hot topic of debate out on the pages around the internet, on mainstream media, and also in private by myself and close associates. Am I happy with some of the things that's gone on between Trump and Israel? Well, I've been highlighting them for the last 2.5 years. I told people when I was on Cosmic Voice that Trump had Zionist connections, including his son-in-law. But there are two possibilities, and one looks more prevalent than the other as it stands. But like the beginning of the last piece, it's rather difficult in the current environment to define what is really going on, because it's too fluid in many ways. It could be this, and it could also well be that. It could be good, and could also just as well be bad. We'll have to see how certain things plays out before it's defined one way or the other. It will become clear. In a world of heavy threats and blackmails and factions pointing guns at your head, all five of them, plus a whole heap of Democrats also pointing guns at his head, it's easy to back down on certain appointments and certain stances. It may also be part of a strategic war that is ongoing, which has some merit in many aspects. But whilst our team in particular has had direct contact with Trump, we are not able to dictate policy any more than the other factions that are chipping away at him. We've had some pluses in interactions with Trump, certain executive orders in particular, but privately and on some shows I've shown deep concern with Trump, his family and associates, links not with Israel but the Zionists, two very different entities. One, a Jewish people who I've said many times now have been used as pawns, and appallingly at that, and have sacrificed themselves in great numbers. And the other is a political ideology operating with zero compassion for anything, including Jews, and operate for themselves and their agenda. And these people, and some of them are not people, have been thrown out of 106 countries over the last 2,000 years, not because of being anti-Semite or anti-Jew, because the Semite term was introduced in the 1800s. The term Jew was introduced in the 1700s. The letter J did not start until the 14th century. They've been thrown out of countries since the year 30. Near 2,000 years now. So clearly these people were not known by that and were known as something else. Now, here's an entry from a book in the 1800s in the what it was called the racialist classification. The Semitic peoples were considered to be members of the Caucasian race. Look where the Caucasian mountains are. That's why they're called that name. And not too dissimilar in appearance to the neighbouring Indo-European race, Northwest Caucasian and Kartvelian speaking peoples of that region. Now, those unfamiliar with Kartvelian, that is the language of the country known as Georgia, aka Russian, formerly came under the USSR. Now, DNA study also supports this theory that these people came from southern Russia, hence the term Khazarian, as in Kazakhstan, or Ashkenazi, which is predominantly native of the country of the Ukraine. Nothing to do with the Middle East. So the history of these people has been completely rewritten in favour of the biblical narrative, where they told them they're the chosen ones, the special ones. Well, this is how society works. If you think back as a kid, if one pupil, there's always one pupil that the teacher always favoured. Did you like it? No. So they get shot down by all the others. And that's what's happened with the Jewish people. They've set them up as pawns. Told them they were more special than everyone else. Everyone else is a goyim, which is basically shit under the shoe. And brainwashed them into thinking that way. The history of these people, and like I said, how they've been used as pawns, is very distorted and, frankly, to me, a crime against humanity. It's very nasty what they've done to the Jewish people, who are really Russian people. Well, the fact that they were given the same title as the Anunnaki, who also frequented the same region which is now known as Israel. Except the name Israel never appeared on any ancient map, any ancient scripture, nothing. The Jesus story, again, to do with Middle East. Did he visit there? Yes. He visited lots of places, including India. Except where did he come from? Russia. Very soon, when I get some time, which is limited, I'm going to be doing a detailed show, probably a special show, on the history of Russia. It will shock many. On so many levels. And this is why Russia is kind of denigrated and has been attacked more than any other country the world over. And why it is reported to me that Russia was fired on with nuclear weapons back in 1812. Yes, I said that right. 1812. Because the peoples up there were way advanced of everybody else compared to the rest on the planet. The wizards. So when I'm hoping I will find time over the next week to do that show, and maybe people will get off the backs that Russia's the enemy. That's what the powers that be wanted you to believe all along. Like they want you to hate on the Jewish people. They call it anti-Semite, but the Jews are not Semites. Read the definition of what a Semite is. Nothing to do with southern Russia or Caucasian or Ukraine or Georgia. Yet again, where they change the words and distort history. Well, enough of that nonsense. But please don't be hating on the Jewish people because of a political system that has goose-stepped right round the world, including Nazi Germany. Don't think they were different, because they weren't. Hitler offered, what was it, the name? Benjamin, I think it's Benjamin Begin. Mr. Begin, I think. I may be wrong on that. along with Churchill, offered all the Jewish people captured, which were mainly Poles and Hungarian, nothing to do with Israel. He offered to hand them over and put them in Palestine. And Mr. Begin said, we don't want them. That's how much the so-called Jewish people wanted their own people back. So they let them starve. Yes, the Germans will get the blame, and I'm not for 1 minute condoning what they did. But there was an opportunity in 1942 when most of them, according to the cabal-operated Red Cross, who were going in there and monitoring the prisoners in the concentration camps, saying they were looked after rather well. It's in the official records. Even up to 1944. But when the Germans got stretched, because the Germans were trying to take Russia out, and then the globalists of America and Britain joined in, those camps got left. Why? Because Britain went against the Convention of War and bombed the supply line into the camps. So the delivery that into the concentration camps were all bombed by Britain. So what happened? The people starved. The medical treatment was cut off. They don't tell you that in history class, do you? Oh no. Let's blame an enemy that they tell you doesn't exist anymore, when in reality the SS never went away. History is littered with those types of sleight of hand, blame those people when it was actually them all along. And for far too long, the general populace has gone along with it, like hating on Muslims. No, hate on the political clowns that are running Muslim Brotherhood, like Obama, Huma Abedin, to name two. Nothing to do with the Muslims. And if you don't believe that, go and read the Albert Pike prophecy of 1888, where he says we will have a third world war where the Christians will take on the Muslims. They told you 140 years ago. Except they tried to do it in 1990. It failed. 2001 didn't last too much either. Right, let's get into some Q&A, and I've got one more piece that I want to cover to end the show on. Really positive piece. I don't know whether I've collected all the questions. Let's see what we've got. Something afoot in Armenia right now, extremely historical place which has a border with Iran. And from what I gather, it's a peaceful and positive push for change. I'm just wondering if you know if the protest is being fueled by the goodies or buddies. I'm sorry, I haven't got any details on that. There's a lot going on in literally every country and every facet of life. But if you get any more details, please pass it on. I'm going to be 65 this year, and with all the awful things I learn every day, the corruption is so bad, the only way to fix it is to overthrow the government. I have grandchildren that will have kids of their own in a few years, and I'm afraid of the horrors they're going to have to face. Is there any hope that this messed up world can be fixed? I think it is. I think it's being fixed on many levels at the moment. Some of it just made the public, a lot more that's made the alternative media. Like I said, it's not getting worse, you just know more. That's all. And the illusion that everything was better in the old days was just that. You were in your amnesic sleeper bubble. Everything looks hunky-dory in that. Except it wasn't. It was hidden, which is worse. It feels like last month something must have happened as far as sleeping and dreams go. I can remember so much more than before. However, I still have no real control. I'm more of an observer within the dream, first person mode. Also, it feels like I'm not really sleeping or dreaming, more like alt-tabbing out of one reality into another. Is this normal or natural? First part, things have changed on an energetic level. They've ramped up again in the last 10, 11, 12 days, of which we're seeing physical signatures rippling through the ground, posted up this week. That's the physical proof of what is going on. As for the dream, not sleeping or dreaming, well, some would argue that the awake time of your life, which is anything from 12 to 18 hours depending on who you are and how much sleep you need, would say that you are asleep during the day and are actually awake at night. You certainly do an awful lot more than you would in the day. It can, if you get some memories of it and can bring it back, not everyone can bring information back. Sometimes you come back with massive downloads, and other times you get one word, one sentence, maybe a song, and you have to work out the puzzle. You know, it depends where you travel. If you go far away from here, time is different. So whilst it only be 2 hours to the vessel that you've been asleep, the spirit may have been gone for 50 years. If I ask you to remember, because most of your time is awake, if I asked you to remember, like I asked one of the members this week, what did you have for lunch on November the 15th last year, would you remember? No. And that's part of the problem, is how long the spirit has been out. You could have lived a whole lifetime out in one night, depending on where you go. Well, your brain hasn't got enough RAM to bring back that type of memory. Certain things may trigger, and you go, I forgot about that dream. Now something triggers you because you needed to remember a portion of it, and then suddenly you remember a bit more. I think we've all done that. We woke up and go, sure, I was dreaming, but I can't remember. And then something triggers during the day, which is generally your higher self going, you should have remembered this portion. So, yes. Is it only humans that never die, in the sense that we reincarnate? No. Do all beings created by prime creation energy reincarnate? Yes. The difference is there's reincarnation, and then there's loop technology, which is the trap in this system, which is now ended. If that's the case, do Draco also have a life review? Well, they've been trying many of the top end of the Draco, or aspects of the Anunnaki, and other races have been cheating death in a way so that they don't return to source. Life longevity and all that. So this is also what plays into the transhumanist agenda, so they won't have to face their own karma. So it's not going to sit well for a whole set of clowns that have been operating here. Like I said, some of them like Cheney and Kissinger have been rather nasty over a long period of time. Do all beings have free will, or is it something special to planet Earth? Well, this is a free will universe, or was supposed to be, but it doesn't appear we have too much free will the way things are currently, with the cheating, basically, what's been going on. You know, do you think if the unawakened people, or the sleepers as we call them, suddenly had break free of their amnesia, do you think they would have free will? No. We had a big discussion over free will recently on a fairly top level of what if X, Y and Z was done, would that not impinge on people's free will? And my answer was, that's assuming that they have free will, because clearly this planet doesn't. There's magic and word magic and spells have given the illusion of free will when we don't really have any, while they operate only in a small environment. We should have free will in a wide environment, all of us. Can such a being such as Hitler be sent back to prime creation energy to dispose and repurpose its spirit into a positive being? Yes, if that's her choice. Some play roles. You know, not all bad guys are inherently bad. We've all played good and bad roles in our soul development. Not everyone can play the hero or the light being, because then you've got to have bad guys to create heroes. You've got to have dark to see there's an opposite in light. So some will play that role, and we learn our biggest lessons from the dark, because then you can go, I'm not going to behave or act like them. So then hopefully you go the other way. But we all have elements of dark inside of us, and people who deny that are not experiencing the whole self. That's an illusion if you don't think you have no dark inside of you, because everyone has the capability of being the ultimate light being and the ultimate dark. It's all about choice. It's always best to be in a balance. So the idea is not to wipe out all the dark, because everything all being light's not going to be good either, because people will get bored. Less lessons to learn. Less examples of to be set. And the dark can't wipe all the light out either, because it can't operate without light, and vice versa. And this is something I will be saying just before the end of the show, so I'll cover that more. Was the land of Mu before Atlantis? Yes. is Anu still in business, or has he been taken out? No, he hasn't been taken out. Word is he's not as bad as he previously was, but time will tell. Draco are the classic of sleight of hand, in my opinion. They were supposed to, when they left 3 or 4 years ago, remove all the tech. They never. Yes, again, cheating. That particular piece of tech didn't didn't augur too well for their home world when it got returned. They were told to remove. And this is kind of the problem, that the Draco kind of define many of the other races that have been under their control. It's not just humans that are under the control of the Draco. There's many others that don't particularly like them either. So I hope Anu is continuing to prove the interaction that we had a few years ago suggested he was leaning towards a coming together of the two peoples. But given their propensity to lie through the teeth and cheat, that element of trust will take a lot longer to develop with the Draco, in my opinion, which is sad, really. Perhaps their ambassadors here need to work a bit harder and engineer more trust, in my opinion. Hi Thomas, I pondered this for some time, but what if 3 to 5 universal words can we as a team use to identify each other when waking people up, or when just meeting people for the first time to see if they're awake? I try to use English words like awaken, cabal, chemtrails, ET and reptilians. Not too sure that's beneficial to waking people up using reptilians. Well, I get your gist. And subtext, Vatican vaccinations, all very symbolic. Movie V for Vendetta, Triple V. Or if we start a code system, an acronym to identify us, we may become targets. If we're not targets already, yes we are. But methinks we'll get the people to wake up quicker, or does it seem to matter anymore? I use THI a lot and people definitely write it down, but I haven't followed up on whether or not they've actually checked out the site or the show. I kind of like acronyms and kind of quick on my feet with words. It's one of my skills or abilities. It's like the website Think Different, and think is spelled capital THI, smaller NK. THI, Think Different. So perhaps you can use that, like think, truth, honour, integrity, new knowledge. I'm sure you can expand on that. If Australia doesn't exist, am I a figment of my own imagination? And you get some grief over that. Well, as far as I know, some people tell me it does exist, and perhaps it's not a figment of your imagination, but mine. Yeah. Historically, Britain and Australia have largely healthy rivalry, but sometimes it gets unhealthy as well, as you well know, particularly in the cricket. But no, it's not a figment of your own imagination. I think that's the end of the questions. I haven't opened Skype tonight. in case it was that interfering with the show. So there may be more. One quick check on the page. No, that's about it. Right, okay. Final piece to send you off in a positive mode if the Intel didn't do that enough. But on my recent trip recently, I saw things that many wouldn't expect to. Jinns, greys, they all appeared. And I kind of went there to deliver a message. And they came out in good numbers. But the thing that I found extraordinary was the sight of the dark jinns. They're generally in pure black form. Some have red eyes, some don't. Some have blue eyes as well. But it's like a black smoke. Sometimes you'll see those type of figures in the corner of your eye. They're jinns. Now this particular place is known for dark jinns. They play the black magic, they do the hidden dirty work for the paymasters. But they came out in grey, not black. And that is a sign to me, once I had time to ponder on it, that things are really changing on and in this planet and beyond. Where there was once division of many, there is now a common goal shared amongst many groups to work and join together and to continue the eons and not continue the eons of years' wars. Peace on many fronts is now breaking out. Real peace. Now from this person's perspective, to me it's a joy to behold. Races brought up on destroying each other over land, resources and trade are now seeing and feeling the benefits of the discourse that has gone on for the last decade and especially over the last few years. And the general realization we all want the same thing in life, and that we can all go forward together and quicker with a sharing and caring attitude and demeanour and not division. The truth that has been relayed to many races in many meetings, particularly over the last 5 years, has hit them heavy as well, including the Draco. The lies ran deep throughout all of them. The usual rhetoric of finger pointing and apportioning blame has now given way to productive discourse. Having interacted previously during sleep time and from afar, it was nice to be up and close to them, and I'm glad I was able to add my balanced style and demeanour into the discourse, which is a far cry from the warrior and militaristic types that they have often come across. And sadly, they base the whole race, human, on their discourse with those dick-swinging ego-based clowns. It's nice that they allowed us to interact in a way where trust can be garnered on both sides. They no longer are going to tolerate the cabal, the elites, the SSP, destroying not only their inner world below our feet, but also the upper world. And we will go forward, whether the cabal like it or not. They've been blocked in so many avenues now. It's just a matter of time. World War III failed. RV failed. Take over the banking system failed. Keep the trust failed. CERN failed. Raid the underground realms failed. Collect the ancient trinkets that are important to this planet failed. Tried to escape failed. Tried to cause division amongst all the different species. That's failing as well. And I, for one, see a bright future for us all, and maybe in the future we will all get to meet people of other planets, other star systems and other universes. Not to fight them and destroy them and to abuse them, but to go forward like the Creator wanted us to be, in harmony. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name is Thomas Williams, and bye for now. This goes out to all the races.